Let me take you to what had been highlighted previously. I think you also spoke about it just now. Those 34 priority projects that the government had identified. Part of that, they said, was that the objective is to reflect in the economy to achieve a predictable exchange rate by the end of 2016. How do you see this happening?
For me, that could be too soon. I have no qualms about that at all. Because if you listen to both Fashola and Fayemi, they're not promising us a press button solution to this. It comes from medium to long term. And I don't see end of 2016 as a period we can look back and say we have achieved so much towards that, particularly given where we are now with our exchange rate. The gestation period for that will probably be towards the end of this administration.
Not 2016 as they
Definitely
had,
not.
because that's their target. Well, part of the target of that document, which they also spoke about in that 34 key priority areas, they also plan to increase low interest lending to the real sector. Now, this is one huge area people have talked about, the interest rate. So, do you also see this happening?
Low interest regime had always been our desire. But the issue is, how can this become achievable within a short space of time? The productivity capabilities of Nigeria continue to suggest, until probably some of the things that is contained in this particular budget is fully implemented, we begin to see more people employed. We produce more locally to satisfy our local demand, and gradually reduce our dependence on importation. Otherwise, it will remain a wishful thinking.
But how do we achieve that if, you're getting double-digit interest rates that companies, SMEs, find it very tough to meet?
Well, the truth is, your wish is one thing, and reality is the other. If we go by this budget, and depending on the level of implementation and the consistency, year in, year out, then we can begin to hope that both the interest rates and improvement on foreign exchange rate will be positive for Nigeria. Otherwise, it will just be run-of-the-mill kind of approach again, if we do not change our ways. But that's why I said, the starting point is declaration by the president that this is a serious article of faith with Nigerians. And he said that he listens to the cries of people, he's feeling our pains and all of that. But if that would translate to the kind of solution that can bring about this, for instance, the power, availability of power, that will make a lot of Nigerians become much more active positively, then
including security,
name it.
And
so
you say,
they all come together.
And you put a caveat there, you said if we don't change our ways, which is very important here. I also recall asking the minister or reminding her that this budget was predicated on the benchmark for oil at $38, and now we're going to see just a gradual increase. And going back to your warning, if we don't change our ways, it seemed as if we might end up having a bit of some surplus from the sale. And if we do, recall what has happened in times past concerning savings, which some governors were kicking against then, and now we're talking about also going through that route again. What will you be saying, being someone who's been in the financial sector and watching how our economy grow, that you would love the government to do if we finally see a steady increase in the price of crude, which will snowball into something good for Nigeria?
Well, whichever way it goes, I mean, the price of oil, for me, is neither here nor there. But changing our ways really means how to manage the economy. It's not that we are bereft of managers, good managers. We do
so we have them in abundance.
In abundance. But the corruption had permeated the entire society. So whether you're selling oil at $100 per barrel today or $150, if we still operate the way we had always operated, we ain't going nowhere. That is the point I'm making. In an atmosphere where Nigeria had remained impervious to change, there can only be very little hope. Otherwise, even at 38 or even 30, we could manage our ways. But because of what we call Dutch disease that has captured Nigeria, that was why we are not able to get out of the woods, even with the resources that we had. So even if the oil price goes up significantly and we still behave the same way we behave, then we will hardly find it.
You know, listening to you now, what is going through my head is a system of buoyancy, if truly we go by your advice. Looking at the solid mineral sector, what the minister is saying there, and truly if we tap and we have a huge amount of investors coming into the fray in that sector, that alone is something fantastic for the country. And if you put that side by side with oil and other produce, even the Minister of Agric has been talking, it will seem as if Nigeria is just been sleeping on immense wealth.
Yeah, but you see, that is the syndrome of the Dutch disease that I mentioned earlier, that the more you seem to have, the more complacent you become, the more waste you tolerate. Don't forget that there are countries, even within this Africa, that are by far more efficient than Nigeria. And they produce more. They have better outcomes than Nigeria that pride itself in oil. And yet these countries don't have oil. The thing about Dutch disease was that the economy of Netherlands was going very well until they discovered gas in the northeast, and the North Sea. But immediately that gas thing came, you know, the rate of growth declined. And that's what is happening, what has happened to Nigeria. But Nigeria's situation was further aggravated by our behavioral pattern. You know, that's what I mean, that if we continue like this, even if your oil price goes to $150 per barrel, you will not be able to see the benefit.
I mean, we all know the importance of SMEs in an economy, how they need to also contribute their lots to it. And the second leg of that earlier statement, wherein they said they wanted low interest lending to real sector, is that they're also targeting single-digit interest rates. They say, in their words, maybe 9%. And so they are, I think the Ministry of Trade and Investment, as well as the CBN, are the people mentioned here to be taking action on that one. Do you think that is possible this year?
Well, it's, I would say it's possible, but with a lot of conditions.
What would they be?
For instance, there had always been an attempt to lift the SMEs into a higher ground, particularly since 2005. And up to today, we've not seen the desired result. This cry about affordable interest rates for the SMEs to do one thing or the other had not been achieved. Why? Because the fiscal policy disagree with the monetary policies. Take, for example, the intervention funds dedicated in variety of ways, both from the commercial banks, 5%, retention of funds reserved for medium and small and medium scale, the central bank intervention funds, the 200 billion here and there. Where is the impact? If we replicate that, for example, during 2016, and by the way, most of the intervention funds have not been accessed. Therefore, they're just more there. Yeah. In fact, the amount is very small, relatively. And even as small as it is, there's so much difficulty in accessing that same fund. So the impact that you are looking for will not be there.
Wow. Right.
One of those reasons is the fact that there is a political policy about how to midwife those funds to the intended beneficiaries. State governors were allocated funds on behalf of their states to be able to reach out to the medium and the small and medium scale people in their various states. But what do you get? They're mostly tailored towards patronage.
Well, those are some of the key issues we've been raising here this moment on Sunrise today about the 2016 budget. Well, Mr. Osungunle is a former registrar and CEO of Nigeria Institute of Bankers. Thank you for coming on this morning.
My pleasure.
All right, then we'll flip over and have another look at the headlines with Olumide Macaulay.